Well, hello and welcome to volume 15 of Drink the Music. I'm Brian here as always with Michaela. And Michaela, today we are going back to an album that won like a second chance poll, and we were kind of saving it for a monumental occasion. And this week is monumental in the fact that this is going to be probably our last like volumed Drink the Music episode, which is sad and bittersweet. We're excited to get back to movies, but we're still going to be talking about music going forward. But we wanted to save, kind of this album that has resonated with people here over the last couple of decades as being this work of genius. And we're not talking about, Surf and Safari. That's a pretty good one. We're not talking about Little Deuce Coupe. That's pretty good too. Today we're talking about Beach Boys' 1966 album, Pet Sounds.
Pet Sounds, indeed. This album, when you had said, "Hey, we should do this," and we'd put it on the poll, and I was amazed because I had never heard this album in its entirety, and I'll be the first to admit it. And I was like, "Wait a minute." I know the Beach Boys, I mean, obviously, and I was like, but this is routinely on like the top 100, top 50, top 10 albums of like all time. And I was like, how do I not know this album? And then I thought, well, this is going to be one of those albums that's going to have, 18 songs and 17 of them will have been on the radio, like some of the other, greatest, quote unquote, greatest albums of all time. Right. And that's not the case either. And so I was so excited when we had the opportunity to kind of round out the end of our kind of dedicated Drink the Music volume encyclopedia with Pet Sounds, because I really wanted to get into learning more about it and learning more about why it has resonated with so many people for the past almost 60 years.
Yeah, absolutely. We are, because we put it up for a vote initially against the Beatles' Love album, the Beatles' Love or soundtrack, I guess, and the soundtrack won. But it's interesting, to kind of compare the two, because they definitely were piggybacking off of each other. They had a very kind of friendly, rivalry and competition about, who is going to be tops here in terms of, pushing the music boundaries. And Pet Sounds definitely does that. But before we get into that, who are the Beach Boys when the Pet Sounds comes out? So the Beach Boys were formed in California in 1961. You have Brian, Dennis, and Carl Wilson, plus Mike Love and Al Jardine. So in 1958, Michaela, a 16-year-old Brian Wilson gets really into music, and basically forms kind of like this makeshift family band, recording parts and telling people what to sing and stuff like that, with his brothers there, Dennis and Carl, before bringing in their cousin, Mike Love. Al Jardine, a friend from their school, would join up the band as well, and they formed the Pendletones there about that time. Now, in 1961, they recorded a little song. You might have heard of it. It's called Surf and Safari. That's a pretty good song. Everyone out there is probably familiar with that, and that was recorded, and the band signed with Candix Records. Candix Records kind of went, behind the scenes and changed the band's name from the Pendletones to the Beach Boys. Now, they wanted to name the band the Surfers, but that name was already taken. And thank God, because Surfers, that's a terrible name for a band. That's like the lamest band name of all time. I couldn't imagine the Beach Boys being called anything other than the Beach Boys. So that was a good name change, I guess, even if it's done kind of behind your back. So the first album, Surf and Safari, that was released in 1962. Now, in 1963, Surfin' USA, Surfer Girl, and Little Deuce Coupe. All three of those albums were released in 1963. The Beach Boys were a busy group of young lads for sure, and so on and so forth until 1966, the 11th, yes, the 11th album for the Beach Boys. So that's like 10 albums in like 4 years. Pet Sounds released in 1966, and at that point they had also brought in Bruce Johnston, who came in and joined the band in 1965. So that was a lot of singing about surfing. And you know what, Michaela? Pet Sounds, not very many songs about surfing. Zero songs, if I recall.
Zero songs about surfing. And I remember, because I've done a lot of research on this, because I listened to it the first time and was like, I don't understand what the big deal is. I know we can talk about my inability to recognize greatness when I hear it. All day, we can talk about that. But the first time I listened to this whole album, I was like, I don't really get it. Okay. But I saw in my research that also the people that were listening to it in 1966 were kind of the same way, because this was very different than what they would call surfer music. Although I think that the harmonies still I mean, they're still there and still relevant, but this absolutely was kind of a breakthrough album. It was a change in direction for them. You're not talking about surfing. You're not talking about babes. You're not talking about any of those kind of one trick pony extravaganzas that they had done, that they had been so good at, that had made them these ginormous superstars with these 10 previous albums. This was very different. It has like this psychedelic aspect to it. It's very and we're going to talk about all those things, but this was definitely something that kissed goodbye their beach music era and moved into something totally different. And it wasn't as well received as they were hoping. But then it still has made its way into these greatest album of all time lists, which I find really cool.
That's right. Yeah. And we're going to definitely dig into all that here as we make our way through the album and talk about it a little bit. But before we do that, Michaela, what we need a really good cocktail or a mocktail this week. So that way, whether you are going out to California to do some surfing in your Little Deuce Coupe, or you're going to be sitting at home pondering life and the things that got you to this artistic point, just like Brian Wilson did. So let's do that. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back to whip up this week's drink.
So, Brian, I'm really excited about this particular cocktail because it is truly a mocktail cocktail experience, which, I really love that. I have a young son at home. He's really getting into the Beatles. And this week he was all about the Beach Boys when I was listening to this for like 100 times. And so he was like, Mom, can I be part of the cocktail experience today? And I was so glad to be able to say yes, because this is actually really fun. It's a fun drink. It comes from To Simply Inspire. And the way this Beach Boy punch is put together, it is a mocktail. And then you can add some liquor of your choice. Brian, I know you've got some great ideas to brighten this up or darken this up, however you want to say it. But it's really good. And this is definitely something, if you're going to have like a Beach Boy party in the fall at Christmas time, I think like a luau-esque kind of extravaganza. This you definitely make in bulk and serve to all your people. So that's a good idea. I like this idea.
That's true. Yeah, this is going to be good for your Beach Boys themed party here going on for sure. And I really like I'm going to link to the article, of course, just like I always do. But if you read through the article, which is a lot of reading to get to the recipe, which a lot of these are, but it's actually kind of fun because I think the curator here of To Simply Inspire, I think it was like her grandmother's recipe that she had in a book, and then it was called like the Beach Boys Punch. So I just imagine like grandma like bopping along to Surfer Girl whipping up this punch like back in her day. Like that sounds pretty good to me. So what you're going to do basically is into a big punch bowl. You're going to go with 1 quart of cranberry juice, a pint of orange juice, 2 quarts of ginger ale, and the juice from 2 lemons. Now you can certainly just take those in parts and pare that down if you just wanted to try like a cocktail or two or make like a smaller batch of this. So this is going to be definitely party size there, because that's like almost a full gallon of liquid right there. So going to do that, mix that up, add some ice, and then serve and enjoy. And it's going to be pretty kind of straightforward, like party punch that you might find at like a high school dance or like a wedding reception or something like that, right? That's kind of what the vibe is for this, but it is a little bit sweet, Michaela, which is probably why your kid liked it, maybe.
Oh yeah. Oh, he loved it. He was like, this is the best cocktail you've ever made, Mommy. I was like, well, that's great. Where is the vodka or the gin? Because that's definitely what I needed to get through that. We did not make a gallon of it. So I did like equal parts orange juice and ginger ale. And I did a splash, what would be like, I don't know, 1 ounce per glass of the cranberry juice. If you wanted a little bit more tart, you could do that. But I just kind of eyeballed it to make the single drink. And then, of course, the juice of, I did maybe like half an ounce of fresh lemon juice. Okay. So that's what I did to make mine. If you don't want to make an entire gallon. But I mean, at this point, guys, girls, people of all, I'd make a gallon. Just do it. Just lean right on into that.
just make a gallon. You can put it in the fridge, and that's going to keep for quite a while. So, Michaela, we need to doctor this up a little bit. It's a little bit sweet, and we're drink the movies here, drink the music. We like to have a nice cocktail. So go ahead and mix this up. But then, what you're going to do for your own, Michaela, and normally, you'd see people jazzing stuff up with some vodka, maybe, or like a rum. A rum would be probably pretty good in this. That would be very Beach Boysy kind of feel. But I think that the perfect accompaniment here to this is either going to be I don't know, like 3/4 of an ounce, give or take, of either some Aperol or some Campari, because it's going to be bitter. It's going to pair up so beautifully with that orange juice. It's going to give it just this little bit of an edge that's going to cut through that sweetness. And I think that sounds like the bee's knees.
It does sound. It sounds like the Beach Boys' knees.
It
Sure.
sounds less good now. It sounds less good. You ruined it, but that's okay. So
No,
definitely so try that out. I think it sounds good.
no, that does sound really good, actually. I am not surprised because I know you love Campari and um, oh my
Aperol,
God,
yeah, Aperol,
Aperol. Yes, those are some of your favorite spirits to add to things. I didn't even think about that. I think that's inspired. I now have
yeah.
to, and just full disclosure, everybody, we did not make this cocktail together. This is one we did not do together. So now after this recording, I've got to go add some Aperol or Campari. I got to see what I got. And because I think that sounds delicious. And I think that that's also better representative of the music, because as we are going to get into with all the songs of the Pet Sounds album, they sound very different than what the meaning of some of these are, and sort of
Mm-hmm.
this kind of harmonious piece, but also with an edge to it. They kind of cuts through and this is very inspired. It's almost like you have your a podcast or some sort of
Wow.
professional
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, something
knowledge
like that.
around
Something like
how to
that.
create cocktails, Brian.
That's right. Yeah, we are doing our best here for sure. But yeah, it's something that's delicious, and it's something that you wouldn't expect, just like Pet Sounds. So let's do this, Michaela. Let's go ahead and mix one of these up. We can try it with an added spirit or two, and we'll be right back to chat about this week's album, Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. We'll be right back. All right, Michaela, the year is 1966. The Beach Boys have come off a string of surfing tunes, but now prepare to feast your ears on Pet Sounds. Wouldn't it be nice, Michaela? You're just singing this off air. I'll let you sing it here in just a second, because this is a song about growing older together. It's a song about growing up. The Beach Boys here are in like 19-part harmony. I don't know, there's how many Beach Boys are there? There's like 6 Beach Boys, but it sounds like there's like 100 Beach Boys. They're coming out of the gates on fire here. Let's see. In this one, this is going to be a recurring theme throughout this. Is like there's like 1,000 instruments on everything. So there's accordions, muted timpani drums, and then all of those voices. Wouldn't it be nice to live together in the kind of world where we belong? I like in this song in particular, kind of when you get like through like into that little like bridge thing, the tempo drops out just a little bit, and it kind of makes like those big like wouldn't it be nice where the timpani comes back in. It just feels like so impactful when it like revs back up into full blown glory. But wouldn't it be nice? That is one of the more popular tracks off of this that you probably have heard out there if you've never listened to this album.
Yeah, it's like one of the greatest kind of innocent love songs. I feel it's innocent and wise, right? Because I feel that when you're young, you're like, and this song is really kind of about a young couple fantasizing about how amazing romantic life could be is as an adult. And it's not it's just so innocent and pure. This is cited and sung in a lot of romantic comedies where it's like this idealistic idea formulation when you're young of what it's like being in love as an adult. And
Mm-hmm.
but also like as just a person coming of age, wouldn't it be nice when this idealization of what it's like when you're an adult, when you really have no idea what it's like to be an adult, but you're like, it'd be so cool because we could live in a world where we belong. I also want to point out this is in 1966. There was a lot going on in the world in 1966, and
Mm-hmm.
so there's probably a lot of layers to this that we won't necessarily understand because we weren't alive in that time, but there's a lot of people that were looking for a world in which they felt like they belonged. It's not so different than today in many ways, which is sad. But I think this idealistic piece and this beautiful, harmonization of vocals just sets this up correctly for the ride that we're about to go on with Pet Sounds. It's one of the most iconic Beach Boy songs of all time.
Mhm.
Probably the most iconic is coming a little bit later in this album, but I really love that they set it up this way because as a listener, you're immediately like brought into this blanket of warmth and honey and just beautiful melody. I do have a question because I couldn't find this when I was doing research on this particular song, but I feel like in the bridge there's like a xylophone.
Oh,
Is there
yeah,
is there
could be. Yeah,
did you
there's like 1,000 instruments on this
yeah.
whole album for sure. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah, I imagine in 1966 you drop the needle on your record and wouldn't it be nice comes on and you're like, oh yeah, some more Beach Boys stuff that I'm excited about, right? Because this sounds like the most like classically Beach Boys of the
Yeah.
songs on the album, right? This song basically sounds like a young couple like holding hands, skipping down Rodeo Drive and like some romantic comedy, right? That's what the song sounds like. And then
Yeah.
you get into something completely different. You Still Believe in Me, track number two. So this song opens with a piano, but they've kind of manipulated the strings here. I guess they were playing them with like a hair, like a bobby pin. So the piano sounds kind of like a harpsichord, but not really. It has kind of it sounds to me like a Renaissance like era, like King's Court kind of thing that's
Hmm.
going on here and the way that it sounds. And I love the opening line to this song. I know perfectly well I'm not where I should be, which is really a pretty brazen statement from the Beach Boys, right? So all those surf songs. The song's very introspective and it acknowledges that yourself as being a bad romantic partner, basically, who keeps being forgiven. And how do you deal to that and come to terms with it? There's like a six-part harmony in the closing Oz, I think, which sounds insanely cool. Then there's like bicycle bells and a car horn, which is just comes in like out of nowhere. And it's very kind of like unexpected and like it's almost like jarring maybe the first time you listen to it, but then it kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know, like it's weird and it kind of makes sense. And something like that is something very much exactly what you'd see like the Beatles do in Sergeant Pepper or on the White Album, where there's just like these random like sounds that would come in. And
Yeah.
as the Beatles and Beach Boys were kind of playing like tug of war with how progressive they could push these pop sounds, kind of in this era of the bands.
Yeah. No, I definitely felt very jarred. And again, this was the first time I listened to this album in its entirety for the sake of the pod. So sorry, I'm late to this party, but I was very much like, what is this? I liked it. I liked the sound of it. But it was very jarring to me from this, wouldn't it be nice if we were older?
Yeah.
And then he's like, you still believe in me, even though I completely messed up and I continue to mess up and I'm not where I should be. And I'm sorry, but I'm not that sorry because I don't think I'm going to, very strange. I was like, wait a minute, this is not the Beach Boys that we know and love. There's no surfing. There's no hand holding.
Yeah.
There's just this impression of this unwavering loyalty of my lover that I'm probably just going to continue to step on. That's at least what I thought the first couple of times I heard this. But I do think that the intro is really cool. And apparently, they like plucked this stuff with a bobby pin. They plucked the piano with a
Hmm.
bobby pin. I don't even know how that would work. So now I have to go find a piano and a bobby pin and like try and recreate the sound because it's so weird. The just the layers of this was like the layers of sounds and the different kind of randomness of noise. I listened to it a couple of different times, and I don't know what your perspective is on this because you listen to it on vinyl and I listen to it with headphones on my phone. But I felt like I had to um, like re-examine the song multiple times to kind of get everything. And I
Hmm.
think that was done certainly by design. But I get why that might have been a little lost when it first came out because people were just like, I just want a love song. Wouldn't it be nice again? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. It is. You play the piano that way. You take the top off the piano, and then basically it's just a big harp laying on its side. You can pluck that with your bobby pin as much as you want to there. But yeah, this album really, and we'll kind of get into kind of the way that the album was constructed and kind of the legacy bits of it. it's something that requires work. It's very similar to like the White Album, in a lot of ways. Like if you just listen to the White Album one time and you're expecting Abbey Road, that's not what it is. It's very weird and strange, and there's a lot of odd ambient noises and stuff like that, and you're like, what is this? There's like a 12-minute long track of just like this random noise and stuff. So yeah, you definitely have to kind of put some work into it, but the more you listen to it, the more kind of like, I don't know, it's like a flower like just starting to blossom, right, as all of these layers are kind of unfolding, and that's really what you get if you put the time into listening to it. Now track number three, That's Not Me, is a little bit more kind of bare bones. It's a little bit more stripped down, which kind of sounds unique and is kind of interesting on this album that is playing with so many sounds and soundscapes and things. So basically, That's Not Me, when the album was being put together, the recording process of this was basically, Brian Wilson and the rest of the Beach Boys were going in, they were recording their vocals, and then they had studio musicians playing all the musical parts. The Beach Boys weren't playing their actual own instruments, except for on track three, That's Not Me. They were all playing their own parts. So that's kind of unique there. Mike Love takes the vocal lead here from Brian Wilson. There's a really very, very subtle key change that happens towards the end of the song. Otherwise, this is pretty much just like a 60s pop ballad, which is almost standard run-of-the-mill fare, except on an album that's so unique and different and cutting edge. Like, it makes this song more interesting than I think that it is.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I thought this one, again, I'm not a musical person, right? I mean, I love music, but I have no idea what I'm talking about with music theory. So I had to do some research on this song because I was like, I don't know what this means, but it's going like up in its entire tonation, and then it's going down. And apparently that's a key modulation that I'm talking about, which this song has tons of, as well as what they consider mood shifts, which I think is really interesting. I like the idea of the song where, again, it's much more introspective. The lyrics are basically this guy saying, I'm better with my lover or in the life that I'm in now than pursuing a life where I'm alone. But I'm serving this kind of dream that I have, and I really like the lyrics in that sense because it's kind of pondering and wandering, and so is the song. But I really thought that the brave choices that they made in the way that it sounds with these key modulations was really cool. It's kind of it's kind of hard. This is a working album. I think you're absolutely right. Where you're still you have to really kind of take it in. This isn't something that I think you're going to really appreciate just kind of listening to the background while you're doing dishes or something. This is definitely something to be experienced. And it really took me, what is this, track number 4? It took me this long to be like, all right, I give in, like, I get it. I'm going to sit, I'm going to quietly like absorb all of this music to really get it, because the first couple of songs after Wouldn't It Be Nice are so different. It's like, are you sure? You're making these choices, and I'm listening to these songs, and they're not the same at all. And they're so vastly different than what we were expecting from the quintessential Beach Boys of 1961 and 1963. So for me, as like a new listener to this, that's what I was feeling, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and the sounds are very strange and different coming through. It's kind of like layering out all of these pieces here. We get into track number 4, Don't Talk, Put Your Head on My Shoulder. So the vocals here get like right on the edge of like going just like completely dissonant. It's a beautiful kind of, I don't know, 3 or 4 part harmony that they're singing there, but it's right on the edge of like going out of tune the whole time. It really is kind of like it's almost like like white knuckle like singing, like it's getting right up on the edge there. There's like a classical string quartet that's laying kind of this blanket of sound underneath of it, which sounds really lovely. And then you have the vocals, of course. This one here, it's not my favorite song on the album. Really, probably my least favorite, to be quite honest. But I think there's kind of some neat imagery here in the way that the song was structured. The song is, don't talk, put your head on my shoulders. So there's not, so they're basically singing a song about not talking, which is kind of neat. But I really like, there's a line in here and it says, I can hear so much in your sighs. So like visually, it's almost like I don't know, it's almost like a thought experiment here on this song.
Yeah. No, and it sounds weird. I liken it. There was a parable and a verse in the Bible where one of the I don't know, one of the 12 saints or I don't know, followers of Jesus would like put their head on Jesus's shoulder
Mm.
in kind of this silent. And so at first, that's very much what I thought because I was like, this is the 60s. This song is when it really clicked for me that, oh my gosh, we're entering this kind of, it's a pseudo psychedelic rock, I felt.
Mhm.
And it reminded me of like the Phil Spector's Beatles album stuff. This is when it really hit me listening to this album, right? So we're almost halfway through and I'm like, I finally get it. Because it's talking about this very small moment in between two people. And you definitely feel that they're lovers, but they don't have to be, but that you just know this wholesome, loving, like, I know so much about you. I know what you need, you know, and we don't have to talk about it. There's this just the feeling in the ether that sort of resonated with me. I agree it's not my favorite, but because I don't like to be told not to talk, probably that would seemed a little, I don't
And
know.
I took that personally, says
I
Michaela.
did. I certainly did. I was like, I will talk. But the being here with you feels so right. We could live forever tonight. Let's not think about tomorrow and don't talk. Put your head on my shoulder. I really love that. It's like maybe this is people going off to war because of the way when it was written.
Mhm.
Maybe this was, hey, this is forbidden love. Maybe this is, you know, we've only got tonight. It's something that's never going to work or whatever. But just not having to say those things, but still having the hearts beat together and having that emotion was really strong. So in that way, I thought the lyrics really hit me differently than some of the other songs for that reason.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And that song, we both kind of just acknowledged that that wasn't our favorite song. Track number five, "I'm Waiting for the Day," is probably my favorite song of not the three obvious ones. It's got like this kind of like miniature like big band kind of feel to it, right? So there's like timpani and flutes and like this little like organ kind of intro. And the song kind of goes like in and out of that. Like it'll be like this big, kind of like bold sound, and then it gets like super quiet and small sounding. And it kind of goes like back and forth between that and that and that. You get the line here, "I'm waiting for the day when you can love again," which is nice. There's like a string section that comes in, and at that point you think that the song is over, because it kind of like completely drops out into silence. But no, there's like this crazy, insane vocal harmony explosion that comes in. We have like all six of the Beach Boys and like 5,000 of their friends like singing this harmony. They're like bass and tenor and all these vocal ranges in here. It sounds amazing. I really love the way that the song ends. It's so great. The song itself predates the album by about 2 years. Brian Wilson had written it in 1964 as a solo composition, and Brian Wilson will often talk about how Sounds is a Brian Wilson solo album. But this is one of my favorites, Michaela.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, this song, right? Because it starts in this big band, very big intro, and then it gets softer and then it gets big again. I mean, I can't really say this what Brian said. There we go. Drink the music, whatever Brian said. But I mean, I think I really loved the subject matter too, because how hard and aching is that for people who love somebody that is kind of brokenhearted or coming out of a tough relationship or just not in a place where they can meet them fully, and maybe they know they want to. Again, this is very different than this like, hey, surf's up, girls are cool, and I like my car, and I like this is very like again, it's like number 6 in a long list of very introspective, kind of grown up, complicated relationship songs. And I really loved that because it's a very bold choice. I don't know what it was like from a producer standpoint, not from a sound standpoint because it's amazing, but also
Mhm.
if they're talking at the record studio and they're like, hey, you want to do what, you want to what wait, but we're getting so much traction with the cars and the girls and the sand,
Yeah.
right? And they're like, no,
Remember all
I
that
really
money we've been making for the last 10
I
years?
I want to continue doing that. And they're like, no, I really want to write these songs about like forbidden love or upset or like waiting for the day when someone is finally in an emotionally available place for me to love them. Like
Hmm.
that's pretty adult. That's pretty complicated, and it's great. I love this song. I agree with you. It's one of my favorite songs on the album. It's definitely my favorite that I'd never heard before because this did not make a single, right? And I
Yeah.
was I was like so taken aback. It starts off very swing dancey, and I love that. And then it changes. I mean, and it's very bold that it does that, but it does it really well.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that it really good. Just that this is I don't know. I don't want to say this is the crowning achievement song, but I kind of feel like it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It seems like it was the culmination kind of everything that was trying to be accomplished here, and I love that song a lot. Other than the three songs that you know, and to get ready for one of those three songs, we're going to need a bit of a rest here, Michaela. So let's go in with track number six. Let's go away for a while. This is an instrumental song. It's the first of two instrumental songs we get on the album, and apparently this is one of Brian Wilson's favorite piece of music he's ever created. It's a weird collection of pieces. There's like a slide guitar, I guess that they're using like a Coke bottle neck for slide, which is something you see in a lot of like old like blues and bluegrass music. That's where that sound is coming from. There's violins, there's saxophones, there's vibraphones, there's an oboe in here, and it's just like this little, it's like a little like respite almost, kind of like an intermission, kind of like a palate cleanser, right? If you go out for a fancy dinner, and they're like, here's like a little cracker with a piece of caviar on there. Yeah, eat that, and then it like completely like cleanses your palate and gets you ready for listening to Sloop John B, one of the other songs you would have heard from outside of this album.
Yeah, I really love Let's Go Away for a While. I found myself re-listening to this song just because I feel like I would miss something because of all of the extra, just all of like the details, right? It's got, you said it, it's got every instrument on the planet, but I really love the sound of it. I love that when I first listened to it, I was like, oh, this is totally chill. This is great. This is obviously, it's got it's not psychedelic, but I definitely was like, you could sit here after doing a gummy and be like, wow, this is amazing. Right. Like, and then it was like, oh, what is he saying? Let's go away for a while because it's an instrumental. There's no lyrics. And I'm very lyrics driven. So is he saying, let's go away and be off like a lover, like two lovers going and sitting on a beach or going and having an adventure? Is he talking to himself, like him and his heart? Let's go away for a while because he just came off of I'm waiting for the day. I mean, there were so many things that this brought, and it's not a super long song. I think it's like
Hmm.
2.5 minutes long. But I really love this. It's sort of tied for me to be my favorite between Waiting for the Day and Let's Go Away for a While. And I think they really they pair really nicely together because they're very different. But I really love kind of the way that I'm Waiting for the Day ends and the way that Let's Go Away for a While begins. It doesn't flow. It's not like you can't tell that there's a song change. But I just really love that the choice that they made to pair these two together in the way that they did.
Hmm.
It gets us ready for the next one, which is Sloop John B.
That's right. Yeah, track seven, Sloop John B. You've probably heard this one before. There's a slick little bass line and kind of this little clicking noise that goes throughout the song. And apparently, maybe allegedly, the song is about an acid trip, but it is, as the kids would say, a banger for sure. I feel so broke up, Michaela. I want to go home. There's so much going on throughout the album, but there's like this little tuba that's kind of playing throughout this thing, and that might be my favorite like little like addition to a song. I really like this little like tuba bop that's going on there. And story goes that the Capitol Records, the record company, wanted this song to be on the album because they knew that the song would be successful, and fair play, I suppose, because it's one of the songs that you've heard off of this album for sure. But it makes me wonder if Brian Wilson, took this news of Capitol Records saying, "Hey, we have to put this song on there," and he says, "Okay, well, fine. I guess then I'm going to have to go write Let's Go Away for a while because this isn't going to make any sense to just have Sloop John B just drop in here. So I need to get people like ready to listen to it." And yeah, it's a good one. It's a classic Beach Boys tune, Sloop John B. It's a good one.
It is a good one. Again, I wrote a lot of notes on like, oh, it sounds, I love this weird bass that it's got. Apparently it's got double tracked basses. I don't even know exactly what that is, but that's the sound that it creates.
Yep.
You're laughing at me. It's fine. It's fine. But that's what the sound is.
Hmm.
And I really like the fact that, I mean, now they're just coming out and saying it, right? He changed the lyrics a little bit from "This is the worst trip since I've been born" to "This is the worst trip I've ever been on." Definitely feels like it's a reference to acid trips. It was the 60s. I think this is definitely a good example of when people say it was the 60s, that's what it was. You know, I really think this was a little lost on me, though, I have to say. So I'd heard this song before for sure, and but I didn't know it was on this album, and I didn't know that this was one of the three only singles that came from this album. Um, so this was just a lesser known song to me that they had done. I like it.
Hmm.
It's got that Caribbean folk kind of to it with the I don't know, with the double tracked basses, however
Hmm.
we're
Yep.
saying that.
Hmm.
I like this. I didn't, it's not, I mean, I like it. It's just not my favorite. And it feels almost, it's out of place. And well, it's probably in the right place because it's at the end of a side, right? And it makes sense if Brian Wilson's like, yeah, I'll give this to you, but it feels just very, I don't know, like an out of place space. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, Brian, or if that's what you got or when you were listening to
Um,
it. But I was,
I love the song Sloop John B. I think that it's a great song, but I do agree with you. It does kind of feel out of place, and that makes sense. A lot of ways that the record studio would say that you have to put this on there. And Brian Wilson was probably okay with that because he was about to ask for a lot of money to put this album together for sure. So let's go ahead and take the album break, Michaela. We have made it halfway through our album here, so let's flip over the vinyl and talk about it a little bit. So, a newfound appreciation for marijuana, some spiritual enlightenment, and a desire to make the best album he could for himself, Brian Wilson sets off to work on Pet Sounds. So Wilson says that he viewed kind of each of the songs on the album as its own kind of piece of work, its own kind of individual thing, right? Not necessarily tying them together, but each individual song was kind of its own individual thing. But they would all fit together, kind of like paintings would in a particular wing of a museum, right? Everything is its own kind of piece of music. Everything is its own kind of work of art, but they would kind of play nicely together. And the goal wasn't really to create a concept album or a lyrical concept album, but more of a production concept album, which basically explains why there's like, I don't know, like 1,300 instruments or so, kind of used on this thing, right? This album was heavily inspired by the Beatles' Rubber Soul album, which came out in 1965. And about then is when the album begins to take shape. Every genre of music basically is accounted for within the album. But Wilson said that his primary goal was to make an album that would stand up in 10 years' time. And, mission accomplished, right? So, and definitely it would take that long because people, as you mentioned at the top, Michaela, were not on board with this thing. More Surf and Safari, please. What is this nonsense? Pet Sounds does make it to number 10 on the Billboard charts, but it was the first album by the Beach Boys to not reach gold status since 1963. Gold status is 500,000 copies here in the US, if you were curious. In fact, the kind of reception to this was so dire that Capitol Records released a greatest hits album 2 months after this came out, with all of those surfing tunes on there to kind of cover up the Pet Sounds stuff there. Critics loved it. Thought it was great, but no sales, no bueno, says the record studio. But the Beach Boys would eventually go on to get the last laugh. This is the number two album of all time, according to Rolling Stone. In every incarnation of that list, it is on the it's number one on a lot of lists, and it's top 10 basically on every list of top music of all time. If you look up a list of top albums, this is going to be on there for sure. It's gone double platinum now. At this point, it's sold well over 2 million copies, and a lot of people will believe that the Beatles never get to make the album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band if the Beach Boys don't make Pet Sounds. So that's kind of neat there. And on this album, there's a lot of songs you've never heard before, Michaela. Same as me, the first time that I'd ever heard. But there are some unquestionably great songs here, no doubt. And this album it inspired a lot of like the alternative rock genre, kind of going forward, psychedelic rock, alternative rock. And I think for me, and I think probably for people that are putting these lists together, the real magic of this album isn't necessarily these songs, but it's what you could accomplish like in the recording studio if you put your mind to it, right? If you're a musician and you're like, I really want to have this crazy sound, you can do it now. Anything in your head was possible in the recording studio going forward.
Yeah. And this was at a time when they didn't have the technology that they do today. So I think that that is one of the reasons why it's still so lauded over time, because they did this with very, what we would say now, like very basic things. They did it with instruments. They did it with, like you said, car horns. They had like recorded sounds of trains
They
going
did it
down
with real
tracks.
actual things.
They did it with real things, and it wasn't like this kind of white claw version of like, hey, what if I created an explosion using AI or some chat GHP stuff, right? This was all very uh, detailed work that had to be done, going and finding specific sounds. I remember, we can talk about this now. There's a movie that is called We Are Your Friends, where it's a guy who's trying to be a DJ, like a techno DJ, and make his own techno music, and put that together. And one of the things that he talks about is pet sounds. And I didn't understand it at the time because I watched that movie like 5 years ago. But now I get it, because, they scored the earth trying to figure out how to put together all of these things and all of these sounds to make this layered wall of music in kind of this, with this Phil Spector style and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Putting that together to create what we have. And so while it might not sound much to the untrained ear, it is a revelation. And I think that that's why 60 some odd years later, we're still listening to it, not just because some of the songs are very catchy and very reminiscent of kind of the Beach Boys of old, but also because they're brilliantly made, and being able to take the chance and stay true to themselves. I mean, Brian Wilson had to, that must have been really hard for him when it wasn't doing well. It wasn't this giant commercial success, but it stood the test of time, which is what he wanted. And it's now stood the test of time, 5 decades, 6 decades over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mean, it's such a gamble to take. And now you think of bands doing it, a lot. One of my particular favorite bands, Radiohead, every time an album comes out, it sounds completely tonally different than they'd ever sounded before. And, this was kind of the first like instance of that. And, certainly had, the Beatles with, Revolver and, coming off of Rubber Soul, and then into that where they were, kind of pushing the boundary and changing the way things could be done. But this was certainly like a planting your flag in the ground sort of moment here for Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys for sure. But all is not bad, Michaela, because let's get back to the album. Track number 8, God Only Knows. This is listed as the number 25 greatest song of all time, according to Rolling Stone. But you know what I say to that, Michaela? I said, who cares? Who cares what Rolling Stone has to say? Because Sir Paul McCartney said that it is the greatest song ever written. And if the greatest songwriter of all time says that this is the greatest song ever written, I will defer to him, Rolling Stone. It's kind of a love song. It's kind of morbid, almost, although in a little way, right? So there's some Beach Boys melody here, which is really good. The line, Michaela. So what good would living do me, right? This is a sad song. It's a upper and a downer all at the same time. Brian Wilson.
And it's very telling, I think, that the opening line is, "I may not always love you," because you think it's a love. When I was a kid, I thought this was like the quintessential love song. Like, what would I do without you? I love you so much. But at the beginning, I may not always love you, but as long as there are stars above you, you never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it. Okay. Not sure how I feel about that as an adult, but being so feeling so lost without a person, and having that person be like your one true north, the compass of your life, all of those things that they say in all the romantic stories and songs. I mean, you can't get any better than God Only Knows What I'd Be Without You. I mean, it's like, where would I be? Who would I be?
Where
What
would
would
I
I
be?
be?
Maybe I would be completely fine, or maybe I would have to have to do off with myself. I don't know. Yeah, that's the real question right there. Yeah, for sure. This it's yeah, obviously I just mentioned it, it's one of the greatest songs of all time. You've heard it in 10,000 pieces of, media and commercials and movies and uh video games, and it's basically all over the place. And yeah, it's this quintessential love song with a thread of darkness to it, which I think is kind of something that I identify in a lot of the great love songs, really.
Sure. Oh yeah, because I think real love has a darkness to it, right? Especially if
Hmm.
it's going to be something that lasts. Because it's everything's fine until it's not, and time is the ultimate ruiner of things, right? Because even if everything goes great, you get old, they get old, um, life just kind of happens, right? I mean, and so I love that this song kind of hits that head on about and with just the over and over kind of chorus of God only knows what I'd be without you. It brings up so much to the listener's mind and heart of their own experiences and wherever they are, thinking about past relationships and even if it didn't work, thinking about where would I be without that person that was in my life at this point.
Hmm.
But also this kind of codependency of like, if you've made it to feed ducks when you're 80, what did you give up to do that? And what would you be without this other person? And you know, is that love? Is it codependence? I don't know. It's not any less beautiful, but we see it a lot with people that have been together for so long. They don't know how to exist necessarily without their other person, and that's both beautiful and also maybe very dark, right?
Very dark, little haunting. That's right. Yeah, track number 8, God only knows, but track number 9, I know there's an answer. So, it, I know there's an answer. It has kind of a strange, like little like carnival feel bits in the piano section here, and there's like a bass harmonica, which is something I didn't know existed, but sounds pretty cool. It keeps kind of like coming in, and it's kind of giving a little bit of an anchor to that little like piano bit that's going on in there. This one's basically a vocal duet throughout this thing, which is really lovely sounding. I like that, and kind of keeps going like higher and higher in the register, and it sounds like Brian Wilson's like almost ready to like have his voice crack. Like it gets up pretty high there, but he manages to keep it together, kind of through those chorus bits. The I know there's an answer section. So I like that kind of this vocal strain, and it definitely kind of brings the tone back down from, just this massive hit. Well, I don't even know how massive it was at the time, but this massive song we think about now, and God only knows it definitely brings the vibe back down a little bit here.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that it was originally titled "Hang On to Your Ego," and it kind of goes through someone who knows how people can live better, but it doesn't necessarily want to tell them, or is struggling with how to tell somebody. It's also got apparently this created a big controversy because it like full out references drug culture. And I guess Wilson was introduced to LSD and they said that when Brian Wilson was introduced, he had the full on ego death. It was a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
thing. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
ego death is because I've never done LSD, but that sounds kind of interesting, having the death of your ego gets a bad rep. Maybe you do need it in order to be a healthy human being. I don't know, but that sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah, it keeps you in check for sure. Let's see. We get into track number 10 here today. This one is a pretty interesting sounding song, right? It starts off, kind of par for the course, kind of this weird little intro here. But after the first verse ends, you hear like this weird kind of like dueling bass line. So it's being played on like a bass guitar and like a brass instrument section that's playing kind of this other um like mirroring like parallel bass line. It gives it kind of a joyous feeling here throughout the song. And then at the end I really like there's like this other like bass guitar that comes in, and it's like this super fast like little like thumping kind of bass line. It sounds a lot like Eye of the Tiger, if you're familiar with that song. I like that a lot. Then there's kind of this little like organ bit that at the very tail end, and it sounds pretty haunting there. And that's kind of like the theme of this, right? Is it's kind of like a joyous thing, right? So like being here today, but then, by the end of it, the lyrics go, love is here today and it's gone. So yeah, it takes kind of this little bit of a haunting twist at the end.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that this I thought it was an organ. I put it in there because it has that kind of I don't know, it sounded like a church organ to me.
Yeah.
But I think this one again, it's more introspection. It's more of this kind of it's not all sunshine rainbows. And I again, it was a deep dive for me. I again thought that this was right on the back end of I know there's an answer. This idea that love is this isn't going to last. We know it's not going to last. He's talking about how he needs to slow down, but he just can't because love is here today. We've got to pick it. We've got to pluck it from the tree. We've got to eat it because tomorrow it's going to be rotten and bad. And very the kind of I don't know. The lyrics were very visually awakening for me. It makes you feel
Hmm.
so bad. It makes your heart feel sad. It makes your days go wrong. It makes your nights so long. You've got to keep in mind love is here today and it's gone. Tomorrow it's here and gone so fast. So like, I don't know. I really love the lyrics in this. This is one of my favorite songs from a lyrics perspective.
Hmm.
For that reason, I just thought that the visualizations of kind of waiting, but then not being able to help yourself and then knowing that you're going to grab it and it's probably going to be rotten tomorrow and this kind
Yeah.
of foreboding darkness that kind of shows up in the next
Yeah.
song maybe.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like an antithesis of like seize the day, right? You're not necessarily seizing the day. The day is just kind of there upon you, and then it's gone, right? To get into track number 11, as you mentioned there, I just wasn't made for these times. This is probably the most introspective look we get at Brian Wilson here. I just wasn't made for these times. It's a song about kind of being disenfranchised. Kind of battling with your like self-imposed genius, which Brian Wilson I think certainly was, and certainly portrays as kind of the self-imposed genius and someone that was well ahead of your time. And ultimately, I guess that's what this album really is, right? And in most ways, it's something that's being ahead of your time. Basically, every weird instrument that was at the recording studio that day is used here. There's like a harpsichord, there's a tack piano, there's flutes, temple blocks, timpani, banjo, harmonica, an electro theremin, which I guess was played by the inventor of the electro theremin, which is a weird like electronic little like noise making kind of thing. It just plays like in like feedback loops and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting. And then, we'll talk a little bit kind of about the, kind of the legacy piece of this here as we wrap up a little bit and kind of the inspirations that it had, including the later Beatles work. But this to me feels like if you had to distill what Pet Sounds was into like one song or one track, this kind of is it, right? As to this is what you can do with music, I guess. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the symbolism around this, I mean, we get on the surface with all of the other songs, it's like, well, I don't think I'm ready to be in a relationship. I wasn't made for these times. Maybe I don't. Whenever I'm try to find somebody to spend my life with, something happens. I end up leaving them behind. But I think it was much broader than that.
mhm.
As you say, for Brian Wilson, right? It's very much like, hey, um, these group of people, this band and all of these instrumentalists came together to create this thing that they think is maybe nuts. But far beyond, Brian Wilson was far beyond kind of the times and thinking about, hey, we could do this. We can push that envelope, as it were. And how lonely that can feel, right? Because he's in the lyrics. Sometimes I feel very sad. Ain't found the right thing I can put my heart and soul into, right? Because and coming on the back end of the last song, right, being like, I just wasn't it's here today. I'm gonna grab it now because inevitably this person or this thing that's giving me joy, this love that I feel, is going to change because I'm not made to ultimately have that.
Mhm.
I don't know, Brian, if you've ever felt that way. This song really resonated for me because there are many times where I feel like I'm this so emotional and it's so much for people.
Hmm.
And so this isn't my favorite song on the album because it's just so sad to me. But it definitely, I think, is like this cacophony of like how you feel if you feel just like you are completely out of place, and you're out of place in with work or relationships or your romantic endeavors, just feeling like the world is kind of lost on you, or you are lost on the world, and how like
Hmm.
lonely that can be. And really, like you said, the most introspective song of all time. This is kind of I would say the bottom of the barrel, but the sound, it doesn't sound like he's in this hole because there's so many instruments, and but it's still, and I don't know, maybe there's symbolism there where everything seems okay, but it's definitely not okay. I don't know.
Hmm.
I've had to listen to this one multiple times to try and soak up all of that meaning out of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, we've talked about, through the course of various movies and things that, being a genius person probably is lonely on a lot of aspects, right? Because who do you talk about these genius level things with? Because, you're one of a handful of things like that on Earth. And certainly I am by no means a genius on the level of Brian Wilson or a musician on the level of the rest of the Beach Boys, but we all kind of have those instances, Michaela. Some of us might have something a little bit more specific in mind, but I know, we talk a lot about movies. We've been talking a lot about these albums and things, and I know there are certainly times when I will, listen to something or hear something or see something on screen, or read something, and like kind of like deep down in your heart, like that I'm hearing this and interpreting this in a way that no one else is, and I'm never going to be able to like talk about it with someone, right? Like on that level, like no one is ever going to understand this in the way that I do. And that's kind of like a small dose of that. So imagine you're Brian Wilson, and you go to these other five or six members of the Beach Boys and say, hey, I wrote this album and I want to do it. And they're all, I would imagine they're all looking at it like, what is this? What is this? Have you heard our songs? This isn't us. What is this? And just having like that genius level. And then to that end, it's about having this band of people that you can trust, and trust you and things, and are willing and able to come together and do it. Because the Beach Boys, by all accounts, I suppose, could have been like, now why don't you go off and do that? You wanted to do your solo stuff now anyways, so you go do that. We'll keep the Beach Boys as is, and go from there. So the amount of like trust amongst those people, even like the record executives that let this go on in the first place, because it was a very expensive album to put together. I think in current dollars it costs for roughly like $600,000, which is a lot for a recording session, for sure, especially nowadays when everything's being done digitally and electronically, and all your money's coming on the back end for the 15,000 songwriters that are coming in to produce your album. So yeah, it's kind of neat. And like I said, it's kind of like distilled into like this mission statement, I think, of what the album was trying to accomplish here. And speaking of the album, Michaela, track number 12 is Pet Sounds, the self-titled album here, or the self-titled track here. This one was originally called Run James Run, and that's probably because they'd originally meant it to be some sort of like James Bond theme. It's another instrumental piece here, but it's much longer than the first instrumental piece. The first one's kind of like this palette cleanser, but this one is more of like a, I don't know, like a musical composition, like a stage musical kind of thing, where it's running through these different themes here. Probably meant to be some sort of uh, soundtrack to a James Bond theme there. There's a kind
Yeah.
of neat like lo-fi guitar, and the percussion section here, it's got like what do you call those things? Those things that Matthew McConaughey plays all the time. Bongos. It's got like the bongos
Bongos.
there, so it has kind of a more like beachy feeling, I guess, kind of in that section.
Yeah. No, that makes so much sense. I didn't realize that this might have been used in a James Bond movie, but that makes so much sense now, because there's like definitely times where you're thinking someone's driving fast. I visualize someone running, but also like, I don't know, like the tension, like we're having to I don't know, disarm a bomb or figure out a code break. But definitely in like like a beachy location, maybe where this is happening. Um, they should have used this for the Halle Berry coming out of the ocean. That would
Hmm.
have been good. That would have been
That would have
good.
been that would have been good. That would have been good. And that gets us to our last track here, Michaela, track number 13, Caroline No. Originally kind of titled Caroline, I know, but changed to Caroline No here, which is really, really pretty song, I think. The closing song, it's pretty solemn. And an album that more or less, there's some variations here, but more or less it's kind of looking at a relationship in the perspective of it, not working out for some reason or another, not necessarily like the relationship falling apart. It's just not working out, kind of here on the album. And that's what this song is about too. But this song is, I think, decidedly sadder sounding than those. Even in like God Only Knows, where the song is kind of asking if I'll be okay if you leave, if it's worth living if you leave, or I'll be fine if you leave. That song is at least pretty upbeat and it gives your soul some optimism in the song here. But Caroline No is very much more sadder and much more downtrodden. Brian Wilson's vocals here are amazing. I think he's jumping octaves, kind of up and down throughout this thing, which is really hard to do, especially in 1960s where there's no auto tune to help with that. So you gotta be like pitch perfect on that stuff. It sounds amazing, and I really like the lyrics here. It's so sad to watch a sweet thing die. Oh, Caroline, why? And then the song kind of ends. There's like a train that comes through and a dog barking, which is Brian Wilson's dog, there to just kind of, I don't know, kind of hammer the point home that this was really just meant to kind of push the boundaries, I think, of what you were attempting to do with the song and the way that you'd want to close it out. I couldn't really find any reasoning why the train comes in, but I think it's just meant to be kind of a closing kind of point, right? Like you cross the tracks, sort of thing, maybe. So
Huh. Well, the first time I heard this, I totally thought that Caroline had decided to step in front of the train. And so
oh,
that's what I thought. And the dog was barking because it was upset. So and then I was like, oh my gosh, did I just hear that? So I had to go re-listen to it. And I think I've since changed my mind on that, but I do feel the symbolism of, the train is leaving the train is leaving the station. It's now fully on its way.
mhm.
The fact that I think you're right. I don't think something happened where the relationship broke down. I think it's more of, again, a coming of age, right? And we started this album with, wouldn't it be nice when we were older and we wouldn't have to wait so long to find this world where we belong. Well, I think in getting older, they kind of grew up. And Caroline got on a train and left. That's definitely where my mind went.
Mhm.
And it's very sad when you grow up and you grow apart and grow out. But it is kind of the way of things. Very few people can find themselves completely in love with the same person that they were in love with when they were quite young. Sometimes that comes back. And so maybe that's what some of these songs are about is that. But that's where I went with the train. But the dog barking, I was like, why? Okay, so if we're on the train, if the train's left the station or whatever, and I just thought that was another example of pushing the boundaries. It's like, hey, we got a car horn, we got a train, let's get a dog in here. Let's see what happens.
I brought my dog to
You
the
know,
studio today. Let's get the
well,
dog a credit on the album. And I mean, fair. If I had my dog in the recording studio, I for sure would get her a singing credit on the album.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I wonder if when Brian Wilson hears this, he thinks of his dog, right? Too. And
Hmm.
it's something that will kind of enshrine that forever. Like, we talk about hearing, with the new Beatles song that came out just last week, right? Being
Hmm.
able to hear these people's voices again, and maybe that was something that is an added bonus to this
Yeah.
as well. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. And um, yeah, you bring up some very good points there, and kind of in this song, and then the album as a whole. We can talk about that here just for a second. Um, Michaela, the album as a whole, and I'd mention it there. It's kind of talking about this relationship, but it's almost even like more than that. It's a point where you get to, and I think obviously, Brian Wilson is at this point, and I think most of us really, we kind of get to that point in our mid 20s, and you kind of have a couple of times in your life where you have to decide like what kind of person you're going to be and what kind of things you're going to do and where you're going to live and who you're going to spend your time with. And kind of your mid-20s is one of those times as well. And this to me musically is kind of like that. It's looking at what's next and where do I want to go, right? What do you want to do with your music? What do you want to do with your relationships and stuff like that? And I think it's kind of an examination of that, as well as just this big audible kind of soundscape that you're able to create. I mentioned that the recording sessions for this were very expensive, which is part of the reason why it kind of faltered so hard. It got to number 10 on the Billboard charts, but that's a lot of money to recoup for the band, for these record studios who are used to the Beach Boys, twice a year just putting out an album that's going to sell a million copies and make all the
Right.
money and things. Obviously this wasn't you're not going to go on tour and perform Pet Sounds, right? Especially not then. You might now, but you only might now because of this.
Right. I mean, definitely, I think this was an example of taking a chance and having it be the long game and pay off from a long time term perspective rather than this short-lived, like, I want money now. And we've seen that with a lot of other artists, right? We've covered that with Lady Gaga. We've covered that with the Beatles. I mean, there's so many other artists that have had a moment in their career where, U2, I mean, most of the albums that we've covered in the last 15 weeks have had, have either been examples of, hey, I want to go in a different direction, or were an artist that had that want and they took the chance. And sometimes it was spectacular and sometimes it was a spectacular failure. But being able to kind of respect that artistry and take that chance almost always pays off in some way. Whether it's in the dollars that they make, which is their number one, record label's number one kind of goal. That's great. But more importantly, is it really explores this thing that we call music, right? And all of the things
Mm-hmm.
that makes up for every listener on the planet. And it's really special. And you're right. If we didn't have Pet Sounds, we probably wouldn't have hundreds of albums that we listen to now. And it's not because it sounds similar, but because of the work that was done and the chances that were taken, and all of that, the deeper reasoning behind creating this and putting it out there, that then came full circle to what we have now in our musical kind of, I don't know, portfolio of all things that are music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Michaela. Very well said. And yeah, I don't know what else we can say about it. If you do any research on Pet Sounds, there's a ton of information out about the album, about how it was put together, kind of the lasting legacy of it, and all the people. Like if you picked, I don't know, 100 random artists off of Apple's top 100 artists, they're all going to attribute some sort of inspiration back to Brian Wilson, back to this album, back to the Beach Boys, in some sense or another. And just take a lot of inspiration and what you're able to do creatively here in this album. Is it the second greatest album of all time? There's no way to really quantify or qualify that. So I don't know. On my own personal list, I don't know. It's probably not my second favorite album of all time, but I certainly understand, kind of the legacy piece of this and why it's so important. And, if it gives us Paul McCartney's favorite song or best song of all time, then I can't argue with that. I'm
Right.
not.
I mean,
I'm no Sir Paul McCartney. I'm just Brian from Drink the Music. But I can do, Michaela. What I can do is I can throw some Campari into that punch out there, and that's what we're going to be doing. So we're going to be whipping up another bowl of Beach Boy Punch. So let us know out there if you mix up one of those. Send us your pictures, all that stuff, and let us know what you think about Pet Sounds. Michaela, what did you think about Pet Sounds now that you've had a chance to listen to it? You've heard that one song from Love Actually about 10,000 times, I'm sure, but I don't know about these other songs. What do you think about it as a whole, of the legacy of it, and just kind of your general thoughts, I guess, about it before we wrap up?
sure. I mean, I think this album's really amazing. I have to say, the first time I listened to it all the way through, I was like, I don't get it. I don't quite understand But I knew that obviously that's just because I was listening to it with my Michaela ears. And I don't know music, right, as well as a lot of other people. And maybe that's a good thing, right? Maybe it's good that I had that experience that a lot of people probably had in 1966, 67 when they were listening to this for the first time. So I listened to it again, and then I listened to it again, and then I listened to it again. This is probably the album that I listened to the most in the last week or so. To prepare it for the sake of preparing for the podcast, because there might be times where I'm like, oh, I don't know this, but I can at least wrap my head around it. This took me a good 3 or 4 listens before I was like, oh, okay. I hear this, I understand it, I have an appreciation for it, and now, I mean, it's kind of a part of me, which is super cool. Because you're right. I definitely heard 2 of the 3 songs that were out a lot. Wouldn't It Be Nice and God Only Knows. Definitely heard those, but all of the others now have found their way inside me, and that's the beauty about music in general, is that if you don't know something and you're willing to take a chance, just like the record label and the rest of the band was willing to take a chance, it can help expand your paradigm. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we love films that are really hard to watch, that challenge our ideas. This definitely challenged my musical ideas of what makes good beach music. I can't believe I'm saying this because it wasn't beach music at all, but like, you know, and not knowing anything about it, being really educated and expanded in that way. And so Brian, thank you for having the wherewithal to have this album in the first place, because if you didn't, I would still, this a whole universe I would not have known about and experienced. So that's what I have to say about Pet Sounds. I think if somebody our age or younger than us that's listening to the old people talk about this 60-year-old album, go listen to it. But you're gonna need to give it a couple of listens to really experience it, unless you're just like an immediate musical genius like Brian. And then I'm sorry, I'm wrong, and I'm glad you love it, because it's worth your time for sure.
Well, I don't know if I would go that far, but I would say there are some geniuses in our inner circle, Michaela, and that is our patrons who voted for this album in the first place. So thank you so much to our Patreon patrons. It's been an awesome time covering music with you all, voting on these albums and chatting about music. You can go to patreon.com/drinkthemovies if you want to get some more behind the scenes stuff, get in on future votes. We're still going to have music coming both on the main feed and on Patreon, some bonus stuff there. So make sure you look that up if you want to support the podcast. That's a great way to do it. And one of the great things about this, I'm going to close with this, Michaela, is now that you have listened to this, going forward, when you hear an album, specifically some changes, and the one I'm specifically thinking of is something we covered here on Drink the Music, and that is Beck's Morning Phase. Think about that in light of listening to Pet Sounds by Beach Boys, and you hear these things, and then you can tie all these things back. All roads go back to Beach Boys 1966 Pet Sounds. So give that a listen. Let us know at home if you have listened to Pet Sounds, if you like these songs, if you love God Only Knows, if you love Surf and Safari, what your favorite Beach Boys song is. If you have a good Beach Boys cocktail, let us know that. Send us pictures, do all that stuff. You can do it on our social media. It's at Drink the Movies on Instagram and X and Threads and Blue Sky, and Facebook.com/drinkthemovies. Go to our website, www.drinkthemovies.com. That's where you can find written recipes, episode recaps, links to the Drink the Video Games YouTube we got going on over there, all that stuff. You can find that on the website, so go do that. And if you are liking the podcast and you want to make sure you're following along for more music fun coming your way, if you want to be on board when we get back to movies starting next week, you're going to want to do that, because back to movies, it's Barbenheimer time, Michaela. Finally getting back to that. It's ready to go. We've been sitting on it for too long, ready to get that out into the world. So if they want to make sure that they get that, all that stuff, where can they do that?
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, iHeartRadio, anywhere where Spotify podcasts are supported and distributed. Whatever you're listening to now, there is a like button. I suggest you do that, but I also really hope that you press the subscribe button. We've got a lot of content coming out that we've been sitting on because of the SAG-AFTRA strike. So we're really excited to bring that out. If you're interested in more Drink the Movies, now's the time. Don't miss it. You're going to want to make sure you're subscribed so you get all the goodies. And if you're really liking what you're hearing, whether it's Drink the Movies, Drink the Music, all of that, our lobby bars, leave us a 5-star review, because that really helps us get the drink the movies and music stuff out there and build the community. We're just really excited about everybody joining us in our love of those art forms and cocktails. So do that if you wouldn't mind. That'd be amazing.
That's right. That would be amazing. And speaking of amazing, that was the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds. So let's go ahead and wrap this one up, Michaela. It's been a pleasure talking about albums here for these last 15 volumes, and there'll be more music to come and more movies to come. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to everyone next time on
Drink
Drink
the
the
music.
Music.
God only
Wouldn't it
knows
be
what
nice
I'd be.
without you? God only knows what I'd be without you, Michaela, for sure.
Oh, yeah.